Hey everybody, it's Derek coming at you during Black History Month in the latter half of February, and just barely over the latter half actually. And today I wanted to include an Indigenous voice. Today we're talking about Jody Wilson-Raybould's True Reconciliation. I had known of Jody Wilson-Raybould for quite a while. I mean, she's been in the public eye a long time. Very accomplished lady and author. She served as the independent member of parliament for Vancouver Granville, Minister of Justice. Of course, I'm most familiar with her work as the Attorney General of Canada. When she sort of busted Justin Trudeau a few years ago. She's been the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defense, where until she resigned in 2019. So, I mean, she's a very, very accomplished lady, a brilliant lawyer, a really strong Indigenous voice. I think it's exactly 340 pages after the end notes. Not terribly scholarly, but just scholarly enough. It's got just the right amount of detail and well referenced while being sort of conversational. And it was written in 2022, so it's a couple years old. I haven't actually gotten around to her best-selling book, Indian in the Cabinet. I've seen it just everywhere. But I think I chose this just because it was most appropriate to the idea of reconciliation and the general theme of Black History Month. By the way, is this allowed, me including Indigenous voices? It seems to me that, if the goal is to amplify voices of those who've been historically marginalized, then, people wouldn't be too upset with me having an Indigenous voice included in the mix. So anyway, what I liked about this book is it had a very simple approach to the discussion. She's obviously talking about, like, how can we make a difference? And so her three-part method is to learn, understand, and then to act. So very straightforward roadmap, really. And, she gives you quite a lot of context that I think would be valuable for all of us Canadians, probably required reading. If we're not going to read the Indian Act, for example, she gives you a lot of background, much of which, this gray part here, much of which was centered around the Indian Act. It's sort of a deviation from what she was talking about. She had to compartmentalize it because she's like, this is our story, and it's a long story, and in order to really understand it, you have to know what's happened all along the way. And so this was immensely valuable to me, starting from the very beginning, with the Hudson's Bay Company. Actually, what would be a really good bookend on either side of this book would be something I read last year by Stephen R. Bone, is The Company. There's a lot of overlap here. It's called The Rise and Fall of the Hudson's Bay Empire, and it really affirms everything that she's saying here, because this isn't, it does talk about some good things about the company, but it also says in the proper context, all of the horrible things that it was responsible for, and what British imperialism and colonialism did to First Nations peoples out here. And in fact, while we're talking about bookends, I was kind of naughty this month, and I read sort of a counter narrative called Grave Error by C.P. Champion, I think, and Tom Flanagan. It was endorsed, and the introduction came from Conrad Black, who I think is a real son of a bitch. But I had to kind of read it because my friends, they wanted to make me aware of sort of the other side of the story, sort of challenging some of the politics that came out of those discoveries of mass graves a few years ago. And so I'm not talking about that book in this month because I just don't think it's appropriate. And I do disagree fundamentally with a few things in that book, although it was well researched. I'll give it that, and it was well written, even though I fundamentally disagree with its politics. This is all a long-winded way of me saying that I appreciated her book in the context of those two books, because it sort of fact-checked it a little bit, but on the other side, I could see how that counter-narrative did sort of check certain parts that have been accepted as sort of gospel truth. Again, I'm not a denier of the history of anything that's gone on with the Indigenous culture. I am as vociferous as Jody Wilson-Raybould is against imperialism and colonialism. So anyway, I'm just mentioning though that I liked it in the context of reading these other books, and this gray part of the book in particular gives you so much context and so much history that is very well sourced and really well codified. So then she moves from that, understanding what Indigenous people have been through, to now understanding the modern situation that Indigenous people find themselves in, sort of the betwixt relationship, being that they are not fully integrated governments, right, within Canada. They're not a part of Canada's government, and the realities that creates for those sort of caught between two worlds, or those who are caught inexorably on one side of each world. You know what I mean? Which that includes us. And you're going to have a role to play in reconciliation, because while you personally are not responsible for everything that's happened, it is our responsibility to at least put an end to intergenerational traumas that continue to this day. I know there's been a lot of discussion surrounding restitution and redress and all of that sort of thing, and there's many opinions on how we go about that. But what I appreciated is how she shows that this is the reality for most Indigenous peoples, and this is how Indigenous peoples and Canadians can come together to get on a better track with one another. True reconciliation is kind of like post-racialism in the United States. It's a pipe dream at some point, right? Like, you're never going to have perfect racial relations, because some things, how do you put all of those years of slavery for Black folks? How do you really get over that? There's no getting over it. There's no true forgiveness that's available, and but we can work towards better relations. And I'm learning more and more, especially through voices like Jody Wilson-Raybould, how to get involved and the conversations that need to be had. And it can happen at a very ground level, just book clubs. If you have a community that you get together for coffee or whatever, you can talk about these things, and you've done your part. It doesn't necessarily mean going out in the streets. You can tell that she's a source of great wisdom and reading, and she has a fairly first-hand understanding, I guess you'd say a second-hand understanding, of the residential school system that existed here in Canada up until the late 90s, with her mother being a residential school survivor. I didn't really know much about her. I had learned of, the falling out that she understandably had with Justin Trudeau, but I didn't really know much else about her, and so it's nice to have sort of a shorthand and to understand somebody's background. And I really appreciated her, the balanced way that she comes at such a difficult topic. Because the history of Indigenous folks in this country is, it really is parallel with, Black history. And you can see how there's a great amount of sympathy between both racial groups. So I think I rated this at 5 stars. Maybe I rounded up. I probably rounded up from like 4.5. I'd highly recommend it. I think it's healthy reading for all Canadians, probably even required reading, and it's not too terribly heady either. It's very approachable. Let me know in the comments if you read this book or if you intend to read it, and I'll see you down there. Thanks for stopping by. Hey everyone, I hope you liked this video. If you want more like the one you just watched, click the suggested video on this screen. Make sure you subscribe, and to connect with me on my other platforms, my handles are linked below in the description, alright? Take care, peeps. Till next time.